So I got that Bible verse wrong.
Yeah.
As the first Peter.
I was like, no, it's not.
Well, welcome back to another Canyon Questions, where we're taking your questions and seeking to answer them from a biblical worldview. It's been exciting to see just the variation in all of the different questions that we've been getting. You know, practical questions, theology questions, Bible questions, just all over the place. Yeah. So, got a bunch of questions this week. So I will just jump right in. First off, we got a question from one of the members of our church. How should church members and pastors respond to other churches that have arrived at a different position, a position differing from their own church with regard to whether or not to continue to meet physically, especially when the government has ordered churches not to meet physically?
So how should we, as members of our church, Canyon Prescott, respond to other churches that determine to do things differently,
right,
in light of what the government has decreed, demanded, suggested?
So we've determined that we're going to do what the government said, and we're going to stop meeting for a time.
Yeah.
Other churches might be doing something different. They might just continue to meet or something else. It's different from what we would do.
Sure. I've been saying all along.
Respond?
I've been saying all along from the beginning that this is a time to be gracious with other Christians. There isn't a playbook for this and how to deal with this. They don't teach you about this in seminary, so the people are making decisions that they think are best for their congregation. Put it this way, I don't see people saying, let's sin as much as possible in making this decision for our church. Now, with that being said, it doesn't mean that another church might not be sinning. They could be sinning. I do think it hurts a testimony to go against what the government is saying. In this case, if the government tries to tell us what to preach on Sunday, sorry, you have no jurisdiction over that.
Mm-hmm.
The government here, what they're doing here is about public health. Almost every church on the face of the planet agrees with that. They're not threatening religious liberty. There aren't basketball games right now either in arenas. So, if they say, hey, basketball game's okay, church gatherings not, then we've got a different thing and we'll probably disobey. But this is different than that. So I do think that churches can make the wrong decision here, hurt their testimony, maybe even put some people in harm.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, each local church is responsible for what they do. So how do we respond to their church? To put honestly, we don't. I don't respond to other churches. It's not my deal. If they call and ask for advice, which has happened, then we'll give them counsel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not my place to comment on what another church is doing, even if I think they might be wrong. So that's how I would answer that.
Sure. As you think through, like some of our members might be getting calls from friends saying, well, my pastors and elders have determined this, and how should I think about that? So you would encourage lots of grace.
Lots of grace, but at the same time, if your conscience is troubled by what you're commanded to do by your leaders, that's something that you don't want to take lightly. So if one of our members, and I know we've had this, if one of our members is asked for their advice from someone from another church, my church is meeting, I don't feel comfortable meeting, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
I would first ask the question, are they telling you to sin? Are they saying you've got to meet or else you'll be in church discipline for not attending the gathering?
If you don't come, you're forsaking the assembling together of the saints.
Yeah, and if you feel in your conscience I can't do that, then that might be a reason to leave. I say that very carefully because I'm not a big fan of leaving churches. For most reasons. There are many reasons to leave them, but for many of the reasons people do leave, I don't think it's a reason to leave a church.
Certainly a reason to go talk to your leaders.
Absolutely. So that's why, my first thought was if a friend called me and said, my church is meeting, I feel like it's wrong to meet, I would take my friend to 1 Thessalonians 5:12. We ask you, brothers, to respect those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Be at peace among yourselves. So I would just say as a default friend, like, love your leaders. They're in a difficult spot.
Yeah.
This is new to them. Even if you disagree in the end, do it respectfully, do it winsomely, do it, hey, can I talk to you? Can I set up a Zoom call? Can I come in, stand 6 feet away from you? Can I just give you some things on my heart? And just say, I'm for you, I'm praying for you. There's a way to do that when you disagree with someone that is winsome and prizes unity and love. And there's also a way to do it, when we think we're right, we do so many things wrong. So because I'm right, we shouldn't be meeting. I'm going to get 5 of my friends in the church and we're going to send a nasty email. I'm going to threaten them by saying, hey, we might all leave. That's just a bad way to do it. That's harmful to the body, to the unity. So you might be right on the issue, but wrong in how you do it.
Yeah.
So I would say to my friend, just have respect, honor them. They're in a difficult spot. But even if you disagree in the end, and they're not making you sin, and I think in this case, the church isn't saying you have to be there, then you don't have to do that. If they're saying everyone's got to be at church or else you're going to be under church discipline, that might be evidence of poor leadership that's even causing you to stumble and violate your conscience. Yeah, so that might be a reason to leave, even if you had to move out of the area because you couldn't find another church in the area that would preach the word.
Sure.
So
yeah,
it's there's so many factors. Every situation's different, but those are some general things I'd say.
Yeah. This is also likely not a permanent situation.
Right.
Yeah. Fast forward to next year at this time, and it's very likely. Of course, like you said, the one thing that we've learned from this is we don't know what to expect next, right? Nobody can predict what's next, but it's very likely that this is not a permanent situation that we've got to tolerate.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there's a second part to the question. I think you already kind of answered it. What should be the attitude of church members towards their leaders if they personally come to a different conclusion?
Yeah, church members toward their leaders, support, love, prayer, encouragement. If it is a sin issue where I'm sinning if I obey you, that may be a reason to leave. All other things, it's you go along. You're gracious in your response. Hopefully they're gracious to you. But that we're very independent, in our country, in our state. And the Bible talks a lot about submission to authority, honoring authority, not just submission, but honoring. So I think that's something that's lost. And so we all have our opinions on, I'm sure people have opinions on what our church should do.
Sure.
We have in every matter. But at the end of the day, someone's got to make a decision. Someone's got to move forward. So prize the unity.
Yeah.
If they're causing you to sin, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Then leave well, leave politely, leave and prize the unity of the people that are still there under their leadership. Don't burn the place down on your way out.
Yeah. So. When we think about churches and leaders submitting to the government that the Lord has placed over us, it's not submission if we only do what they say when we always agree with them.
Yeah, that's right. It's not submission at all in any relationship.
Yeah.
If you only do
what you agree with. The same is true then of church members.
That's
under
right.
The church leaders that God has placed over them. It's not submission if you always do what they say until you disagree.
That's right. Them. That's really important.
And then as soon as I disagree, it's like, I can't submit to that.
Yeah, right.
That's not submission.
Yeah, a lot of times those things are actually just pride. I'm not saying in this situation, but a lot, I can't submit to that.
Sure.
Well, they just decided to cancel a Bible study or to move it that way or to do something different with the program of the church. I just can't submit to that. Well, you can. You just don't want to.
Yeah.
So
great.
But that just reminds me of how gracious our people are. I'm thankful.
So true.
So if you're tuning in and you're from Canyon Prescott, just the way you've prized unity in this church is remarkable. This isn't us correcting an error in our church.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Next question. I've heard pastors and others talk about God's perfect will and his permissive will. Is this proper theology?
Yeah, the Bible does. It doesn't call them two wills of God, but it speaks to two different wills of God. If you kind of just look at the context, there are different types of God's will. So if I asked a person, is it God's will that you pray without ceasing? Yes. it actually says in 1 Thessalonians 5 that it's God's will that you pray without ceasing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can say, well, then why doesn't it happen? So that's an example of understanding the differences in God's will. One's a will of decree. It's going to happen. So he created the heavens and the earth. That was his will of decree. He determined that it would happen. He determined that his son would be born in human flesh, live for about 33 years, die on a cross. That's all his will of decree. He decrees that you and I are sitting right here, right now. So we know his will of decree. There's also his will of desire. It's his will that we pray without ceasing. That's a will of his. That's his desire that doesn't always happen. It's his will that we submit to the government. Doesn't always happen. So that's an answer I'd give. There are different aspects to God's will, and there are different ways to, different terms to throw out, but I often think of his will of decree and his will of desire. So.
And it could be such that he would make it the case that his will of desire always happens by just killing everyone at the moment that they disobey.
Yeah.
But he's gracious.
Yeah.
And he permits.
Sure.
Things don't always go exactly the way that he desires for them to go.
Things don't always go according to his will of desire. They always go according to his will of decree.
Right.
Even the cross, and how horrific that people would, forge this mock trial against Jesus. It's wrong in every sense of the word. He's the most righteous person to ever live. He's the ultimate righteous person. And yet there were false charges laid against him, and he was executed. Well, that's not God's will of desire in terms of, I want you to sin and do this false trial, but it was the thing that he decreed. It was his will of decree. So his will of decree always happens. His will of desire doesn't always happen. Yeah.
That's good. Good. Well, next question here. My questions have run away from me. They're coming back now. What is our church's view on cremation, since hell is represented as fire?
Yeah, it's interesting that this question would be asked. I'm actually working on a study about how to die. I don't know what form I'll give this study, book form, small group material that could be sent out, I don't know. But one thing I've been thinking lately is people don't know how to die. It sounds funny, but it's similarly when people come to me for to officiate their wedding, and I say, so what do you want to do? Order of service, this and that. Yeah. And most of the time they're like, never done this before. Or maybe I did it once, but then my husband went to heaven, or whatever it may be. It's not something you do normally, so you don't know. Similar, in a similar vein, I think of dying is the same way. I've never died before, so I don't know how to die well. And I also think there's a lack of understanding our Christian history. Church history isn't prized nowadays. We think anything new and entrepreneurial is the way to do church. Many people think or act like the church started in the 60s with the Jesus People movement, or in the late 90s with the Reformed resurgence, or we'll take your pick, 20th century, but the church has had a view on death and dying and how to care for a body afterwards for a long time, but we just don't know church history. So I would say this: cremation has, for a long time throughout church history, been foreign to the church. Some actually, many people would consider it a horrific thought. Again, like the questioner said, bodies in hell are burned. That's not something that we'll ever experience in that sense. But while I say that, I'm not saying cremation's sin. I wouldn't lead anybody in our church to think that they're sinning if they're cremated. The Bible doesn't say it's a sin to be cremated. So I would recommend burial whenever anyone asks. And I would show them biblically why. When you bury someone, there's a hope to it. There's this hope that what was perishable is going to be raised imperishable. So even burial, there's a sign, that 1 Thessalonians 4 is true. My body's going to be raised. you might say, well, how does that happen when the body decays and there's just bones in the casket? I don't know. God works all that out. But the idea is the dead body goes in the ground. A new one will come out. A new one will be given eventually. Jesus was buried. So burial is a sign for hope. My physical body needs to die. I don't want to go to heaven with this thing. Too many limitations. So my physical body needs to die. So when I'm buried, it's a sign to all watching. That physical body is dead. The soul is with his Lord. And one day the Lord's going to give him a physical body, because physical bodies aren't bad. They're just corrupted with sin. One day the Lord's going to give him a physical body not corrupted with sin. So there's a hope in burial. There's an expectation there. And so now, with that being said, there are reasons that people are cremated. There are reasons Christians are cremated. Space. We don't have as much land as maybe there was 2,000 years ago. More land is privately held. More land is held by the government. So it's not like you can just bury someone wherever you want. So that's a real consideration. Finances. It's cheaper to cremate than to bury. So again, cremation is not a sin at all. But I do believe we don't know our own Christian history. Burial has been the way the church has done things for 2,000 years. Now again, today there are difficulties in that sometimes. And again, I would never tell someone they're sinning if they're cremated. But there is a sign of hope in burial that I think we miss sometimes today.
Yeah.
There's a reason there were cemeteries in church, on church property back in the day.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a good
It
question.
sounds like you'd say, while cremation is not a sin, you would encourage people towards burial, and even if that wasn't a possibility, at least encourage them to know the history behind the decision that they're making.
Yeah.
Don't just make the decision in a vacuum.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's good.
Yeah.
So final question then, there's different words used in the Bible for sin, the word trespass. What's the difference between a sin, between a trespass? There's even verses like Ephesians 2:1 where both words occur in the same verse. So what would you say, how do we think rightly about the difference between a sin and a trespass? Why does the Bible use different words?
Initial answer, Bible uses different words because different words have different meanings. So every time a word is used, it's trying to get you to focus on that particular part of it. So there are different emphases on that word group for sins or wrongdoing. So the Holy Spirit intentionally uses one word and not the other. So I would say there's intention there. Oftentimes when you see those words used together, the idea is this sin, this iniquity, this transgression, this is all-encompassing. It's using multiple words because there are so many facets to sin. One place is Psalm 32, David's confession of his sin with Bathsheba and Uriah. He says in the early verses, "Blessed is the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord counts no iniquity, in whose spirit there is no deceit." So he uses 3 words for wrongdoing. And I would say that, you can study those 3 words and find out the nuances of those, and that's certainly appropriate. But I think the ultimate thing he's doing is to show how all-encompassing what he did, how bad it was. Sin, falling short of the glory of God, missing the mark. You've heard that term. Trespass. It's doing a violation, going beyond the bounds. Oftentimes that word is used in harming others. There's restitution that needs to be made. Iniquity, just a gross evil, a gross injustice. So the words are very similar, but they also do have differences. So I would say in the places where there are multiple words, it's trying to get you to see the full horrible nature of sin. So that's how I would answer that.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I was thinking about resources for people who may I have that question about these other words.
Sure.
There's I think about like blueletterbible.com as a really great resource to be able to go and look at different words and different verses where that same Greek word would be used, that same Hebrew word.
Yeah.
understand the different nuances between the
Yeah.
various words.
Yeah, it's a really good question because they do have different meanings.
Mm-hmm.
They're not radically different, but they have different meanings.
Sure. In the same way we'd use, well, he's mad, he's angry, he's furious.
Yeah.
3 different words, different nuances, and you'd use each one for a different reason.
And in that case, there are levels to those.
Mm-hmm.
Frustrated,
Yeah.
enraged. You would say enraged is there's
Yeah.
more fire to it. That's not always the case in how the words for sin are used.
Yeah.
It's just kind of focusing on a different aspect of
A
it.
different perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Great. We had one other question. We're going to put pause on it here and defer it. It's a question on discerning God's will, and specifically regarding the Urim and the Thummim in the Old Testament.
Okay.
How we think about those. You're going to be covering those this Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, in your study on Leviticus.
Leviticus 8, we're going to look at what those were, those stones put in the linen ephod. So I'll explain that. You touched on it in your Romans message. Josh also talked about decision making
Mm-hmm.
last week in his series. So
Yeah.
it's interesting how that's just kind of come up, and we're all
Yeah.
studying 3 different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also preached a message on it a while back at our church on a Sunday morning, 1 Samuel 23.
Good.
David and Saul, and decision making in the will of God. And
Good.
David is specifically using the linen ephod brought by Abiathar the priest, the Urim and the Thummim, and how to rightly discern God's will as a New Testament believer.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So, well, great. Thanks for joining us for another Canyon Questions. You can continue to send your questions in to any one of us, but probably the best way is the email address questions@canyonprescott.org. We'd love to be able to answer your questions from a biblical worldview.